disclaimer. So I'm SJ. If you haven't met me, hello, I'm here. My office is on the second floor in Driftmeyer. And then David is actually a graduate student in physics and astronomy. And so this is a collaborate joint project. So honored to work with him, not my student, but phenomenal student. And if you haven't met him yet, he's great. Also want to give acknowledgement that this project was funded by UGA's Teaming for Interdisciplinary Research Pre-Seed Program, which means we got $3,000 to do the project. And thank you, UGA, for doing that. So this is us, part of the study team. Within physics and astronomy, we also had collaborators, Nicholas, Nandana, and Craig, who were tenure track faculty, lecturer, and then an assistant department head. We also had Lindsay Bailey, who's working as a researcher, supporting David with the analysis of the work. We had our own Dr. John Morlock, part of the team, supporting his expertise in motivational theory and analysis. And then two undergraduate workers that work with me, Wylam and Finn, Wylam has now gone on and transferred to Georgia Tech, and Finn is still completing his degree here at UGA. And last but not least, Emily Rosenwig, who's now at Columbia University, but was also one of the supporters for the grant. So big team, but that makes it STEM and that makes it collaborative, which I really appreciate. So our overall research question and goal motivating this work is how are graduate teaching assistants, or GTAs, motivated to engage with their assigned duties? And we really just want to describe their motivation within their role. And so when I think about research and I think about questions, I think of it like a sphere. And there's a lot of ways to look at the experiences or a problem. And the way we're looking at that, this is through motivation. That doesn't mean you couldn't look at it through interest or self-efficacy or mental health. There's a lot of different ways, but for us, we're really curious about like, how are they motivated to do what they need to do given the context of their role?
Yeah, so for our background here, I'm actually going to move over. Is this working? I can't tell.
Yes.
Yes, okay, cool, thank you. So for our background, wow, column is nice. So we know that a lot of graduate students are funded by their graduate teaching assistantships, and there's already a lot of research into this in terms of things like preparation, professional development, content knowledge, and things like that. But one of the areas that's lacking is the experiences of the GTAs themselves. So that's what we want to look at. Now, as a graduate student, I'm starting to find out that grad school can be stressful. No one told me a PhD would be hard. So this is what we want to look at. And we're going to do that using expectancy value theory as a framework. So specifically, we're using situated expectancy value theory here. Know that there are a lot of different types of expectancy value theory. We are using situated expectancy value theory. And what it says is that there are a few different constructs of motivation that lead into your motivation for a task. And the first of those is expectancies for success. How well do you think you're going to do on this? Basically, self-efficacy. Then we have some different types of subjective values that you can assign to a task. And those are intrinsic, utility, and attainment value. So intrinsic value is just the value that's intrinsic to something. I do this because it's fun, because I enjoy it, simply because I want to. Utility value is about how useful something will be in the future. I'm doing this because it will help me later down the road. And attainment value relates to your identity. I'm a good student, so I do my homework. You do it because it's important to who you are as a person. And then lastly, we have cost. There are lots of different types of cost, and sometimes you have it arranged differently, but in this theory of motivation, of expectancy value theory, these three different areas all lead into the motivation for a task. And then, as you'll find out, expectancy value theory wasn't quite enough to cover everything that was discussed in our focus groups. We needed to add another theory of motivation, so we turned to self-determination theory. Now, this has three overall categories of motivation. We have competence, autonomy, and relatedness. Now, competence in practice has significant overlap with expectancies for success, so you're not going to see much of that after this. Autonomy is just that, autonomy. How much responsibility do you have? How much are you trusted to do things of your own accord? And relatedness is relatedness. How connected do you feel with other people? When you feel connected with your community, you are going to be much more motivated to accomplish something. So those are our two theoretical frameworks here.
So going into kind of the recruitment and data background, The data that we're presenting today is from a photovoice study that was conducted this spring in January of 2025. We had 4 participants who submitted 5 images in response to a prompt. What is the range of experiences you've had as a graduate teaching assistant? This is something that we piloted in fall of 2024, and it's actually building off work where I've done photovoice studies, and so it's an adaptation of those. But today we're just going to talk about the 4 participants and their responses. We do highly incentivize, and this is just something I do, like if I'm asking for someone to give their shared experiences, I want to treat them like experts, and that means paying them for their time. This is a rather time-intensive study where not only do they do a pre-screening survey, they have to then go get the 5 images and respond to them, then come to a 90-minute focus group, discuss them, and then a final exit survey that's also member checking. So it is very time-intensive, and it's about 4 hours of work, and so I try to pay about $25 an hour for their work. So that's where the compensation comes in. So photovoice, what is photovoice? Great question. The way I don't want you to overthink it, it's photo and voice. You're putting a voice to images. But really, photovoice, it's called a participatory action research method, and the goal is to promote dialogue around important community issues, lending itself to research where there's linguistic or communication barriers present. And so a lot of this research focuses on areas where whether that's direct language barriers, cultural barriers, norm differences, but for some reason, talking about a thing gets difficult. I've used it within mental health research because if I were to come up to you right now and say, hey, how's your mental health today? You're gonna like especially STEM will be like, what are you saying to me right now? And so giving a way of like an image to serve as a buffer to facilitate that conversation. And oh, we're focusing on the images, not how we're feeling right now, to get to kind of the things we want to talk about. As I said before, participants are viewed as co-investigators of the work. It is not our goal to come in, listen to you, and then tell you what you tell us are important. I'm here to facilitate a conversation where you're going to tell me what's important. I'm going to listen and report that. And we'll get into that when we talk about analysis. But they are co-investigators. Their lived experiences are the expertise we want to capture. And yeah, the goal is to really empower participants. So through the act of the photo voice, like the goal is also to like bring together graduate teaching assistants across disciplines who may have differences or shared experiences that could then be used to empower them and better their experiences. And so the logistics of this is you give your participants a prompt, you collect their images and captions that come from that prompt. You then discuss with the participants, and then you analyze that data and synthesize the finding. Something that's really key and why it's really awesome to have David as part of the project is that coming as a faculty member, if I come into a room and say, hey, I'm a faculty member, tell me about your experiences, there's already inherent power dynamics. I'm a faculty member, they're a student, or graduate teaching assistant, and they may actually be employed by me or a peer I know. And so there's inherent power dynamics. But also, as much as I would love to say I can remember everything about my experiences when I was a graduate teaching assistantship, that's just false. Like, I'm not in it right now. I'm not in the current climate, not in the current culture. It's at a different institution. So my lived experiences, although valid, don't necessarily translate to what's happening now for those we study. And so within our study, actually, the reason we have both teams is that there were teaching assistants in both disciplines. They did data collection, and any of the faculty involved in no way, shape, or form were there when it was collected. And that was a way to protect participants of like, we want to learn from you. And that means you might say good or not so good things about people, and it needs to be safe for you to share that. And so no faculty were involved in the data collection to allow for that. So now we want, before we hop into this, like we're active learning folk, we want you to try. And so at the table, and if you don't have a table that has this, you should have with you a piece of paper and some coloring device, whether that's pencils or color pencils. But we want you to respond to a prompt, and we're gonna give you 3 to 5 minutes and then discuss it and share out. But just so that when going forward, we know what's going on, we want everyone to try what this photo voice is. Now, typically you'd have time to go and take images and give captions. Instead, I just want you to respond to this prompt. What is the range of teaching experiences, formal, informal, you've had within your role at UGA this academic year? There is no right or wrong answer. You don't have to pick the most salient one, but reflect on what your range of experiences have been, and then draw an image that corresponds to it. Also try and add a like 2 to 3 sentence caption. And there's pencils in that bag. Good. If you have markers or colored pencils, you can also get up and go to a table that has them and just snag some. Please don't forget to add a caption at the end, like 2 to 3 sentences why you.
Just trying to think of something relevant to teaching experience. Was this specific semester? I don't have anything relevant. Yeah, so it's not. Okay. Yeah. This would be awesome.
Not go to school foundation.
Well, you got references.
We're about half of the drawing part, so. You're doing phenomenal.
That's the two products.
You tell how many semesters he's aware of. Physicist, I got it.
You got it.
So use this last 30 seconds to finish whatever you're drawing, put on your 2 to 3 sentences, and then there'll be time to discuss. We'll get to talk to people. But for now, just wrap up your drawing, write your caption.
It could still be a study, you just can't publish it.
This is purely evaluative now. It could be secondary data.
Oh.
I'm not physics. I built that to figure out skill, but I don't know.
You can go grab.
Okay, yes.
Okay, so once you have finished, please take the next
I don't
2
know what
minutes.
it is, but
Walk with
because
your
of what I'm teaching
share
this
with
semester,
God.
I'm just like, is that a K-map? I know it's not, but.
And I'm gonna share out.
We're all like, it's like one. I was thinking like, oh, I guess I could have thought like pretty grad. But like, I had to give my duty of just a teacher at the time. So.
I know, the only thing that I have done is. There's a lot of.
Here's an example. We also have that. Yeah. Clap once if you can hear me. Clap twice if you can hear me.
Clap 3 times if you can hear me. Thank you. All right, so we want to hear from 3 people. Share out. Doesn't have to be yours, but we want to hear from at least 3 different tables. Rashida.
Yay. Okay. Hi, everyone. So interestingly enough, in my conversation with John teaches graduate students. I teach undergrad and grad students, but when I went to make my drawing, when I think about my role as a teacher, I primarily think of how I interact with undergrads. So I drew a picture of me at the front of my class teaching logic design. And there's also Leo, can't forget Leo. And so logic design is a pretty decently sized class. In the fall, I teach 56, and in the spring, I teach 96. Even though it's a large size class, I use Top Hat. I've always used Top Hat since even before UGA made it free. Thank you, UGA. But I use Top Hat to foster engagement and conversations with students, and so I will, as we go through lecture or present information, I'll do an example for them first, and then the next question will be, it will be like another example that then the students have to do themselves at their tables. So I get them to interact with each other, or by themselves, however they choose to do that. But they'll interact with each other for the next problem, and then they'll have to submit their answers through Top Hat. But yeah,
Awesome.
that's logic design.
Okay, now before we go to the next person, we'll do a quick thumbs up, thumbs down. How do you think this would impact your motivation in a class? Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumb sideways if you're not sure. Just everyone put a hand up. It doesn't. Using Top Hat for interactive class. What's your response? Awesome, thank you. Okay, next individual. David will come and grab your image to display. Okay, yeah.
Really different. I'll focus on one of my images. This one here.
That one.
Yeah, so I jotted down a couple of doodles and then I was like, I need a positive experience. So I recently had in the bottom right, I recently had a doctoral student successfully defend her proposal. So I think education and then regulatory department across campus is really different. So we do have a formal presentation for the proposal. was approved by the committee that outlines what the research plans will be. There was a lot of revision and iteration and back and forth behind the scenes, leading up to that. So then kind of represents me like in the background, supporting role, and her on the stage, making this presentation and doing it successfully.
All right, and then again, thumbs up, down, sideways, how we feel about an advisor supporting through the dissertation to successful proposal process and motivation. Yeah, me.
Surprise, surprise.
Double thumbs up. Okay, all right. Last but not least,
More.
who's someone from the right side of the room. It's my right. Your left.
I'll take one. I was about to take one randomly.
So my situation looks a little different because I'm just a first semester master's student. So I have never TA'd a course, but one thing that grad students are able to do is participate in the mentorship program here at UGA as both a mentee and a mentor. So I have 2 mentees this semester, in addition to a couple students reaching out for, I think they call it like a quick conversation through the program, which is when you've already hit your max mentor mentee count, but someone can sit down with you for half an hour and just kind of ask a bunch of questions. So I think this is pretty fun, just some casual conversation. I drew a table because it's less formal, right? And sometimes even in a classroom setting, and it's more intentional too.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, thumbs up, down, sideways, how we'd feel about motivation to do things around informal conversations. Awesome. Let me go back to the. Can I make sure the recording's still up? How do I? All right, does this still work?
I can hear.
Audio automatically mutes. Hello. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you everyone for engaging with that. We did want you. Hello? Yeah, we want to make sure. So now you know what photo voice is. So this isn't the same formal. Normally you'd have a lot of time, probably like a week or 2 to have the prompt, reflect on it, ask questions, find images, create images, take pictures, and then come together and share in a larger discussion. But this is kind of a nice short introduction to photo voice. I do also appreciate the range of formal to informal instructional practices, as well as there are a lot of positives shared, but I don't know, there's positives, there's negatives, there's intermix, there's complex emotions. So thank you for engaging in that. So from your experiences, that was great to hear out. Now for participants, these are kind of the grouping results that we got from our participants. So going back to the 4 STEM graduate students with their experiences as graduate teaching assistantships, there's kind of these 6 groupings: helplessness, meaninglessness, growing up, mismatched expectations, camaraderie, and student impact on us. So I want to share those because really that's the first step of a photo voice study, is those 6 groupings, which participants tell you, hey, here are the shared experiences, because there were 5 participants, 4 images each, so that's 20 images. They took those 20 images and put those into those 6 groupings of their shared experiences. So a primary finding is just that. These are their 6 groupings. Here's what they're discussing. We use a motivational framework to orient our study and design. We'll discuss these within the context of motivation, but the primary findings are those groupings which they shared with us. Secondary analysis then is where we take the transcript and we actually do human created transcript from the audio, and we apply a deductive coding analysis, aka the framework that we defined. We control F as a human to see if those things show up in the script. So we're applying those motivational frameworks to see what comes up. Now, of course, deductive is very clear cut, but you can do a closed deductive, which is you're looking for your predefined codes and only, or an open deductive where we allowed for any emerging things to come up. As in, David and Lindsay have their own lived experiences. They did most of the coding. They know things outside of the motivational framework where, hey, if things were interesting or surprising, record that somehow and we'll come back to it. And if there's time today, we'll share some of those. And yeah, so there's pretty good iterator reliability. And typically when you do thematic analysis or coding, you want a high level of iterator reliability. What that means is the codes we defined when looking for that data, both David and Lindsay agreed that, hey, we say this is motivation. I agree this is motivation. I agree this is motivation. And any disagreements were just discussed. So now Dave is going to walk us through the participants.
Yeah, so as SJ said, we had 4 participants. I'm going to start this off by saying that they chose their own pseudonyms. So because there's some small departments involved, it's easier to let people choose an animal as their pseudonym than try and come up with a name. So I did not call this person a cow. He called himself a cow. Cow, at the time of the focus group, was a first-year graduate student in physics, and he's a white male. We have Kat, an Asian male in his second year of his computer science degree, and he's also an international student. Giraffe is another white male in physics, and he was a second year at the time. And we have Dog, spelled D-A-W-G, of course, who was in a computer science and engineering degree. He was in his third year of this degree, and he's another international student, Hispanic male. I do want to point out something that may be obvious, that these are all men. You know, it's a STEM education study when you don't get many women to participate. We love that. And yeah, participation is just always a struggle, recruitment is. So I'm about to go through some of the quotes and show you how our deductive coding scheme applied to them. So you are going to see these participants and how they fell into some of these categories or how these categories could be applied to them. So I do want to start off by saying that these codes were all binary. Either this was present in this utterance or it was not. There was no scale. There wasn't expectancies for success. This was a very good. I expect to succeed versus I don't expect to succeed. Just are they discussing their expectancies for success? So that's our first category. One example experience might be helplessness and addressing some of those issues. So we have a quote from Giraffe here who says, "There's nothing I can do about that. I try so hard, but so often what I try to do feels futile." So that would be an example of something that was coded as expectancies for success. Next, we have our 3 types of value: intrinsic, utility, and attainment value. There are some example experiences up there. And one quote we have from Dog: "I got to lead and sort of teach this class. It was really fun." There's our intrinsic value. And I regained my sense of purpose. That's a very identity-y statement. Saying that something is your sense of purpose, that's important to who Dog is as a person. So this is something that's going to motivate him to work hard in there because he sees it as this sense of purpose. Lastly, we have our cost, which can be things like difficulty, emotional consequences, opportunity cost. What do I lose by doing here and not taking my other option? Our example quote here is from Kat. "There just wasn't enough time or capacity to go that deep into every single report." Here, Kat is talking about grading lab reports and wanting to give so much personalized feedback, but there's just so many that he has to do and so little time, and that cost can be very demotivating. So these are our 5 constructs from expectancy value theory. Our question now is, did this encompass anything? Did our participants ever discuss something that we're like, that doesn't really feel like it fits into anywhere, but it's important that we know it? So let's go through one of these quotes together and see. This is a picture of my group chat of the TAs for a certain class. And it was like end of the year. And we were like, okay, all grades officially went out on ELC. Great job this semester. Yay, we're done. That one's easy. That's intrinsic value. Yay. Specifically for this semester, we didn't have like a head TA that we just kind of assigned between us to take on more of the, you talk with the professor, you be the point of reference. Well, those are kind of something, right? They don't really clearly fit into any of our 5 constructs from expectancy value theory. We're assigning duties between us. You do this, you do that. But that's clearly something that we want to note, but that doesn't fall into expectancy value theory. So having that support system and someone to talk with, I guess I'm just extremely grateful for these people. They're so dependable, and I think that feeling, that camaraderie is what I'd say. Similar. So there's something that doesn't exactly fall into expectancy value theory, but is still clearly notable. So we can't just use expectancy value theory to describe the experiences that these GTAs are telling us. That's why we have to expand a little bit. We initially coded just with expectancy value theory, but when we started seeing lots of stuff like this, we expanded to self-determination theory, and we started to see a lot of this autonomy and relatedness, similar to what Dog is saying here. So we add self-determination theory to our deductive code, and now we have 7 constructs in our kind of coding dictionary. So we had autonomy, like being trusted with your responsibility, and relatedness, which is like emphasizing with your students or things like that. So again, an example from Cal here. It feels good to know that students trust you enough to talk to you. So there's that relatedness. The first question is, what can I do? And it feels bad because the answer is not much. There's that lack of autonomy. I relate, but what am I going to do? I just sympathize, but I'm essentially just saying that's too bad. So again, I want to reiterate that this is just binary. All of these would be coded as present. There was not good autonomy, good relatedness, bad relatedness, just is this present or not? And these 7 codes together fully encompass our transcript. Everything that our GTAs talked about that they planned with their images, that was oh, hey, yeah, I forgot about that. Everything fell into at least one of these categories. They're not mutually exclusive, so lots of things fell into many of them, of course. But there was nothing that Lindsay and I, the coders, felt wasn't encompassed by these 7. So there's our code book.
So now we want you to try. So I had each of you write captions. So in your groups, talk about whether that's expectancy value theory or self-determination theory. Do you see any way your experiences map to either of these motivational frameworks? I promise it's not going to be a quiz grade, but we'll ask 2 people to share out.
This will be on the exam. It's a fashion statement. Thank you. I just. Right. Five on the periphery of expectancy value theory.
And I just like, how was it about my life, my class, like. One is like, I have to demonstrate my
Yes.
and these are 2 different areas that we're technically seeing in town. This is where this is going.
I'll be good.
So what we see roadness that it's a self-determination.
Pretty much. Yeah, so.
I'll give you 10 more seconds. Clap once if you can hear me. Clap twice if you can hear me. Thank you. All right, we're just gonna do a quick straw poll. I'm gonna name off each of them and just raise your hand if you think it aligned or not. So, expectancies for success, whether or not you, yeah, oh. Intrinsic value, kind of like enjoyment if you liked it. Utility value, usefulness. Attainment value, if it aligns with, I don't know, perceived identity. Autonomy. Relatedness. Nice. Okay. Okay. Thank you all. Huh? Oh, cost? Oh, we don't think about cost. Cost? Okay, awesome. Well, thank you all for engaging. So now you may not have, now you can say you have your first informal experience qualitatively coding something. Woo! Okay. So now we'll share kind of what our main findings were.
Yeah, so findings from looking through these motivational lenses. Again, we saw that out of all of the things that our GTAs discussed, each thing evoked at least one of these constructs. There was nothing that was kind of in an other category or that we couldn't put one of our categories to. Some of our most frequent codes were relatedness and intrinsic value. So I wouldn't go as far as to say that these are what are present or what are lacking, because remember, we are only coding whether this was relevant or not. So I'd almost say these are kind of the most salient. This is what people were talking about the most. And on the other end of the spectrum, our least frequent codes were cost and utility value. Utility value can be a little bit hard to talk about in terms of, oh yeah, this is important for me in my future. And then we might be able to use this to demonstrate what aspects of motivation GTAs lack or aren't thinking about. So that might be a kind of future work kind of thing. We can use this going forward to inform efforts to improve the experience of GTAs.
And also want to be very explicit. This is not coming from an individual deficit framing, whereas they're lacking a motivation for something. The goal is to look at what are your motivations given this role and what structural, cultural, or higher level order things are having an impact that result in this motivation. So it's much more of a systemic looking at how individuals operate within, rather than saying, hey, you lack this motivation, you need to like this more. That's not the goal.
Yes, thank you.
But you know, whenever you do a project, you're like, well, this is really cool, but there's this other thing, and this fun scope creep happens. So what do we do about experiences that aren't just tied to motivation? And that's where we come up with our fun, unexpected emergent findings. Yay, more things.
Yeah, so these were things that as Lindsay and I are coding, we're just kind of picking out and noticing that this comes up a lot. They're a bit higher level. None of this was actually discussed by our GTAs, so I wouldn't pair them with like their groupings or anything like that in terms of an analysis. But these are what the coders saw coming out of this. And again, we'll see a lot of overlap with some of the constructs that we've already talked about. One of our emerging themes was something that we called degrees of isolation. So just kind of how related you feel or how alone you might feel and the experiences that impact that. So like in our top left corner here, we have, I just did not feel comfortable. It wasn't my place to have this confrontation. It's going to end up that they don't really care, and I didn't feel like I could talk about that. So feeling like you have to bottle up these feelings, these things that you want to talk about, that can be pretty isolating because you want to talk about this, but you feel like it's not your place. I'll give a second to read a little bit of that. I'm not going to read everything out to you, I promise. And yeah, these are just experiences that influence how alone you might feel. Not quite relatedness, but anything that might influence it from a bit of a different perspective. Our next emergent theme was your sense of self. So not just your identity or your perceived identity, but how you kind of come into it yourself. Your personality, where you are in your career, your strengths and weaknesses. Not just, I am an engineer, I am a computer scientist, but more kind of detailed aspects of yourself. So I try to be as personal as I can. You want to be personal with your students, but if you're teaching a lecture of 200 people, you might not be able to get that connection with all of them. And then our last emergent theme here, people are still reading, I'll give you a second. Be good?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, our last emergent theme was kind of the person behind the GTA. So you are not just a cog in the machine, you are not just a grader or an instructor or anything like that, but experiences that kind of remind you, hey, my students see me as more than just this person standing in front of the lecture, that I am a person with my own interests, my own things going on, and things that either aid or inhibit some of those feelings. So I make your experience more positive, feels meaningless, and like especially with the lack of human interaction. or in that top right corner, and be like, how can you not be perfect? So there's some of that perfectionism. And it just made me feel a little more in the moment. So feeling like you have the opportunity to go and take a moment and be a person with each other. And those are the three emerging themes that we've found.
Yeah, so to reflect limitations, I mean, so photo voice studies themselves tend to be smaller. They're a lot more intensive in terms of data collection and participation. Typical studies range from 8 to 12, but there's been studies as low as 2, up to as high as like 26 or more. And so it really just depends on the context for what you need. But recognizing like these are only 4 participants in January of 2025, which I don't know if you remember all the way back to January this year, but there were a few other things going on in the world that make it a little bit contextually different than other Januaries. We have all male participants, so we have no female, no other non-binary or other gender identities present. And also, like, even with a $100 incentive, there were at least 6 to 8 people emailing in the recruitment phase like, hey, I'm interested. I just don't have time because of grading, because of duties, because of other things. And so their roles as a GTA inhibited their ability to participate in a study about being a GTA. And so acknowledging that. With that, I mean, if you have perspective, you're going to lack the diverse perspectives. So we're lacking the voices that weren't represented. There were technological difficulties in actually the facilitation recordings for some of these. But overall, a good study. So for future work, always the goal with these. So I like to use photo voice studies kind of, I don't know if you're familiar with literature reviews, like a scoping literature review. I like to use these in a very exploratory sense. When I know there's something going on, I want to study it. I am very biased towards action, so I don't want to just do something to publish it and move on. Like I want to make change. And so I want to understand the experiences and then use that to leverage off what future work can do. And so it could be doing more time less intensive, just one-off focus groups that don't require you to come with images and get those experiences, but it could also be just looking at more specific stages, different disciplines across institutions. We can look at developing a framework to identify motivational areas for improvement, again, at a structural lens. So like, how can we, like, hey, we notice that we really don't align with utility. How can we make GTA roles align better with utility? Can we build in professional development? Can we give direct connections to future employment opportunities or things that could better align for their interest and motivation? And then just interventional studies to improve their not only motivation, but experiences. Also, so pending from this, and this is part of where the interdisciplinary grant came in, it helped us, we submitted and we're waiting for feedback on the IU's grant, which is actually to look at some of these more of active learning implementations for graduate teaching assistants. So actually starting to do some of those interventions. And so excited for the team for that. Fingers crossed. So yeah, in summary.
Yeah, so to kind of close out here, we used data from a photo voice study where we had STEM GTAs from across various STEM disciplines come in and tell us about their experiences. And we did a deductive coding of these transcripts after the photo voice study. So they found their groupings, they decided which image was representative of that group and all of that. And Lindsay and I went and did our deductive coding with those codes that I told you about. Initially, we only planned on using expectancy value theory as our codes, but we ended up finding that that wasn't quite enough, that there were experiences that were not encompassed. So we had to introduce self-determination theory, and with those two, I would say that we completely described our GTA experiences. And these entirely encapsulate their motivational experiences. And we might be able to use these results in the future to guide programs in supporting motivation and experiences in general. Those are our references. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Nice to see you.
Yes.
So I am about to embark on my first TA journey. What advice would you give me to help me stay motivated throughout the experience?
Ooh, that's a good question. David, I'll have you go first and then I'll follow up.
Oh boy. So I am TAing right now, and a lot of the students that come into the physics department, I end up talking with them and helping them with TAing, since when I'm one of 2 graduate students doing education research, you just kind of fall into that role. A lot of what I tell them is don't take it personally. lots of what our specifically physics TAs in this focus group talked about were some of the underlying issues that they had with how our labs work. So feeling like you're not able to do anything, we saw Jeff said, whatever I try to do feels futile. That's in terms of making things better and enacting changes. So what I would say to a TA who's about to start is, it isn't that deep. Don't worry too much. You will learn as you go. You will hear people talking about how can we change this? How can we make this better? They know what's going on. Make sure that you figure out what's going on before you try and worry about that.
I think added context is that physics GTAs, unlike engineering, have a difficulty updating equipment for labs with high usage, high volume, older equipment. So that's contextually relevant.
I regularly tell my students this equipment is probably from before the Cold War.
So,
I don't think that's always a joke.
so my advice, there's 2 points. One, if they're in engineering, you're taking Dr. Morlock's class, which will give you a memorandum of understanding that you can co-develop with your instructor. I think a lot of students, instructors just miss that initial meeting where it's like, hey, what do you expect of me? What are my duties? Where should I be putting my time that aligns with what you want? And so setting clear expectations for time and management early on, I think are huge. And that, like, I just reference it every time I meet with them. Like, what did we say we're doing this week? Okay, are we doing this week? Do we need to adjust? Oh, that took you twice as long. Let's cut this then to make sure you're not overdoing it, or I'm not asking more than what you should be working. The second would be figure out what your goals are. Like, give yourself, what are you doing this for? Are you doing this because you're getting paid and you have to do it? Are you doing this because you want to become an instructor? Are you doing this because it rejuvenates you to teach students? Whatever those goals are that can change, figure out what they are so that way when you're in the thick of it, you can remind yourself why you're doing it. And none of those are inherently bad. It's just going to be like, hey, I'm only doing this because it's a paycheck and I have to do my other research and I really want to give really good feedback and I'm already past my hours. So if I'm doing this, am I changing my goals where I want something more from this? Or do I need to be honest that to keep my goals, I have to be okay not doing this right now? It's not a great thing to go through, but it can help align what your decisions are. Good question. Yeah. Yeah. So you're asking like, how does the motivation of a TA impact the students in the class? So I'll ask a question. Do you remember having a TA in a classroom? I mean, I've had TAs and you can tell the ones that are there and aligned for learning and feel supported versus those who are just there because they have to be and may not feel supported or having a rough time. Like people's emotional states, whether they like to or not, when they're showing up in a space, impacts others. And so it may not, like maybe you're just doing this because you have to. Like I understand it fits in the mechanism of the university and part of the funding package. That's fine. But two students who are with two different supervisors or in two different, say, physics or engineering, they come into engineering, the equipment all works. They just have to show up, do the lab, go home. They come into physics, rather than helping students, they're spending half the lab working with broken equipment. That's a very different experience. And there's a lot of other factors that could impact it, but it's definitely, you want someone whose motivations for whatever, like there's no good or bad motivation. You're a person going through a role that has your own backgrounds. That's all okay. If you're aligned with cost, that's fine. Hey, if I do this TA well, I can then move to GRA. Awesome. That's fine. But are you being supported in that to be able to do the job? I think that definitely has an impact. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and add, my office is right by the introductory physics labs. So as students walk out, I sometimes get to hear what they're talking about as they're leaving labs. And it's unfortunately common when you hear someone say, wow, I can tell my TA just really did not care about that lab. Why am I supposed to care? And things like that. So it definitely does mirror pretty well or unwell, depending on your perspective.
Yeah.
50 years ago, so some of us go to use the same road and put. One thing though, 6 years ago, the labs and lectures quite often were out of alignment. And so we were doing labs over stuff that we learned in lecture 3 weeks later, which made the lab for students very confusing and DA found that in device between us not knowing what's going on. Is that still an issue with the labs and the lectures are not sync?
So to echo to make sure the recording also has it, the question is, do we still see a concern in that lab content in which GTAs typically are responsible for lab portions of courses being out of alignment with lecture content and that discontinuity causing problems within instruction? Is that the question? Yeah, no, that definitely still exists. Yes.
I feel so seen.
And that came up in our findings. Like people, like part of at least the pilot group, I remember it coming up of people being like, well, I'm teaching something that was in class 3 weeks ago, or they haven't hit in lecture, and so I have to teach them as I'm going. That's still definitely common.
TAs are expected to be in a supervisory role. You supervise the lab, but eventually get to a point in the semester where you have to teach the content in order for the students to have any hope of understanding, getting anything meaningful out of the lab. And because the lecture won't cover it for another month. And then there are even labs where we go over content that won't be seen in lecture. And it's sort of their one chance to learn this if they're going to learn it.
And to go back to structurally, I think that goes back to relatedness, to what's the communication between the TA and the faculty. So I meet with my teaching staff once a week. I'm like, what's going wrong? What do I need to do well? What's missing? How can I support you? That's the point of the meeting. I don't know how common that is among instructional teams, but like if my lecture is missing something, we'll bring it into class. Or if I'm not gonna be able to cover it, I can explicitly say to students, hey, I'm not gonna cover this by the time you hit lab. The slides are on ELC. The TA will cover it in there. And if you still have questions, let me know. And if you need more time to complete this as a result, I will extend the lab deadline because that's on me. So that's a very different, like that's a structural thing where the instructor is point of contact. But again, I teach 50 students right now. If I had 450 students in a big lecture hall, very different dynamic and ability to communicate that.
Our labs are also mixed in who their instructors are. It isn't one lab for this one lecture section. It's you sign up for a lecture section and you sign up for a lab section. So we have students who are in all different places with their comfort in the material. And sometimes that helps because they can help each other out, and that kind of peer learning can be very helpful. But I would not call it ideal.
Thank you. So I'd say 2 more minutes for any last questions, and then we'll just release everyone. Yes.
So I'm really curious why you decided not to split it into positives and negatives this time. And if you see, like, what meaningful insights can TAs take away from it without understanding what kinds of experiences were positive versus negative?
Oh, so to clarify, it's not that we aren't analyzing and discussing them when they're positive or negative, but we're first coding simply the presence. And then from those existing codes, we'll group them into the range. And it's not just positive or negative. There's positive, there's negative, but there's anything in between. I don't know if you guys have seen Inside Out, but like I had an aha moment where, oh wow, emotions can be complex. You can be happy and sad about the same thing. And so we're still looking at the affective state for these responses. We just didn't do it in the coding. And if you look at the groupings, there are positive and negative experiences under each of those categories. And so it's not that it's not there, it's just not, we're just not separating out them as we code.
Lindsay and I also just did not want to impose our views of what was positive and negative. So, for example, one of our international students talked about sort of the family pressures that they were under. And neither Lindsay and I are international students or first gen or anything. So we can see an argument for that being a positive and pushing you to greater heights, but also being a negative of, I have all of this pressure on me. It may not be what I want to do. So we didn't want to go and impose our views and our biases of, is that positive or negative?
Well, thank you everyone for your time. Thank you for participating and engaging. I hope this was helpful. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.